Today on the podcast, we have Risa Steinberg. So happy you're here with us. Thanks for being here.
Pleasure to be here.
As per usual, we like to turn the mic over to you for you to give us your short, brief life.
Short's not the word I like.
Okay, brief overview, life overview.
Oh my God. Born in New York, went to the High School of Performing Arts and then to Juilliard. Danced with the José Limón Company for many years, then left and danced with independent choreographers, Bill Cratty, Colin Connor, a variety of choreographers, guested with different companies in Europe and in South America. Then spent many years working with Annabelle Gamson. And Annabelle was an extraordinary dancer and reconstructor of the works of Isadora Duncan. She brought strength to the Duncan work, which was extraordinary. And she picked, I can't remember what year this was, but she picked 6 women who were all over 30, who she felt really had the elements of being soloists in the way that solo dancing was meant to be when the beginning of modern dance started. So it wasn't doing a solo in a piece, but it was carrying the piece, which is what Graham started doing and Helen Tamira started doing, and all the pioneers did that. And so I was fortunate, and I was one of those 6 women, and it was crazy great. She was a remarkable coach. Tough, which I love, and demanding, which I love. And we did Duncan work, which I had no particular emotional interest in doing it until I worked with her. And I actually learned so much about Limón through learning the work of Duncan. I was no longer doing Limón, so I was a little late in the game. But and then because of Annabelle's extraordinary effect on me, I created a solo concert that was called The Celebration of Dance, and it had work beginning from Isadora Duncan through to contemporary choreographers. And I traveled the world doing that for many years. Then I was on the road a lot and decided, I remember coming home one night. I always felt like I love being on the road. I love traveling, which is one of the things I'm missing so much right now. But I came home and I couldn't find my bathroom in the middle of the night. And I thought, ooh, it's time to come home. Because that was always my thing. Like if I could go into a hotel and I knew I can get up in the middle of the night and find the bathroom, I was cool. But I came home and I couldn't find the bathroom, and the dust wasn't mine. Yeah. And I realized it was time to reconsider. So I stopped touring as much, and also I taught from being a student at Juilliard. I started teaching men. So I've been teaching simultaneously to performing, which has been phenomenal. And they both inform each other in such enormous ways. And then I started working part-time at Juilliard. They asked if I would do full-time, which you were a part of. And I said, no, yeah, okay, baby. And then I started teaching full-time at Juilliard and still performed with companies, but mostly in New York. And yeah, so I'm still at Juilliard. And then 5 years ago, I was asked to to join Sleep No More, the Punch Drunk immersive theater in New York. And so I've been doing that for now 5 years.
Talk a little bit about the transition from Juilliard. Did you graduate from Juilliard?
I did. You did. Not many of us did back then. People, like our freshman class, I think had like 33, and we graduated with 16, which was the biggest graduating class back then. Wow. Yeah, because people just came to study for a little while and then they would leave. Because getting a degree was not important back then in the way that it is now. Like it didn't determine whether you'd be able to get a teaching job. So most people came because they just wanted a few more years of studying and studying with extraordinary people. But I stuck it out because of I am that way, but also it was a contract I had with my father. The only way I could not go to a university, but I could go to conservatories if I promised to get a degree.
I'm really curious, how did you organize that solo tour, that solo world tour? How did you set up all of those performances, and were you lonely?
That's such a great question. Because I taught for many, many years, and I was a Graham dancer to begin with. Like I was trained at Juilliard. Even though I studied Limón, I was a Graham dancer. And then when I graduated, all through my high school years at Performing Arts and at Juilliard, I had a really bad lower back injury, and part of it was genetic. So did my dad. There was a weakness. Right after graduation, I was teaching Graham in Lynchburg, Virginia, for Helen McGehee, who was my just idol, and she died just a week and a half ago, or 2 weeks ago. And I was running to the studio, and my left leg wouldn't do what I wanted it to do, and so I called my parents and I said, I really think I have to go and figure this out. And so it was decided that I would have back surgery because there was a new procedure that was done. It's called the laminectomy. Now it's very common. But the procedure prior to the laminectomy was really difficult and very, very long recovery, and then actually didn't really sustain its wellness very long. Laminectomy was like this new thing, and I decided to do it against my father's wishes. And so one of the things I realized was that Graham, which was the passion of my life, was actually, because it was a lower back issue because of contractions, was not okay.
Yeah.
That was a big pill to swallow, and I did swallow it. Not easily, but I did. But then by chance, I was very fortunate because Mr. Limón invited me into the company. And I actually thought he was joking around with me at first because I was really a Graham dancer. I mean, I really, but he did. And I faked my way through it for the first few years. And, but anyway, getting back to your question, I was teaching always. But that's really, I mean, if we're brought to this earth for anything, I think that was why I was brought here, I love to teach. And I think it is a calling in some ways for me. I was really, really fortunate. People were always asking me to come and teach. And so I would say, yes, and you have to produce my solo concert. And so that's really how it started. So I would do a 2-week teaching gig and 2 shows. And that started building momentum where then they started to balance out. And then I could just say, here's my show. If you want me, I can do a masterclass. But that was really how it happened. And I did it for years. And yeah, it got really lonely. I think it's probably one of the reasons I allowed myself to notice the dirt in my apartment or the dust in my apartment, because I was ready to not do that so much anymore. Because I was a soloist, so I would travel with a lighting designer.
Oh my gosh.
Sometimes they would supply one, so I wouldn't even have to do that because everything, I could give them all the cues and all the stage management stuff. And so yeah, it did. It got a little lonely.
What's your experience, or what has your experience been with Sleep No More?
No,
I've never seen the show. I know Austin Goodwin performed in the show. I don't know. Does he still perform in the show?
He does, yeah.
Oh wow.
He goes
That's
in
cool.
and out. But yeah, he's definitely a part of the community in a very big way, as is his partner, Paul.
Okay. Yeah.
It is amazing. It's just I'm not really sure how to describe it because it's so enriching and extraordinary and fulfilling. And it kind of just literally, the heavens dropped it down. And I'm not that kind of person. I don't talk that way, but it's what it felt like. That the woman who was the choreographer, Maxine Doyle, I knew her because when I was associate director at Juilliard, I asked her with Larry to come in and work with the seniors. And so she did that yearly. And I was talking to her 5 years ago this summer about whether when she could come to teach the seniors. And we were working and, going back and forth that schedule because she's very, very busy. And then at the end of the conversation, she said, do you still perform? And I lied. And I said, yes. And you want to be in Sweet No More? And I said, yes. And that was it. To this day, it's unbelievable. For me, at this time of life, the balance of using the physicality that I have without having it to be technical in a proscenium stage. I don't think I would ever want to be on a proscenium stage again. But this is acting through physicality, which is always what I loved. Mm-hmm. What we worked on in elements and things like that. So it's stupendous.
Is there a storyline, and do you play a specific character?
Yeah, so there are many storylines that all cross each other. It's fundamentally Macbeth.
Okay.
But there are lots of other stories that co-mingle together. And the audience has free reign. It's a big building. It's 6 stories. They did a brilliant job. The traffic is unbelievable. Still to this day, I can be in there and go, oh my God, how did they think about that? That this one character runs there so the audience will run after them, and then there's another character bringing another group of people. It's just simply brilliant. I mean, to be honest with you, when I first saw it, I was totally lost and I didn't know what was going on and didn't enjoy the experience because I'm very small. Mm-hmm. And when there are lots of people and a full house is 400, and that happens a lot. Oh, wow. You really can miss everything. And I remember speaking to a colleague, Jerome, after we both went, but not the same night, but at similar times. He goes, oh, and what did you think of that? I didn't see that. Well, what did you think of that? Oh, I didn't see that. Because you can't see everything unless you come back a number of times, because there's too many things coexisting.
That's a good business plan.
Yeah, it's a good plan.
You have to come 5 times.
You have to come back, and there are super fans, and they come back. I got a note from a super fan. She'd seen it like 150 times.
Wow. Let's talk about teaching a little bit. So we'll probably talk a lot about teaching. So what do you think, how do you set up a good environment for people to learn?
Well, one, that's an assumption that I do. So.
Okay, maybe I'm biased.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to take this question very seriously. It's interesting. I'm thinking of, I teach teachers methodology to other teachers. Every time I do it like every 2 years. I really think about why and what is that about. So I think that, a dancer used to walk into a studio and just trust you implicitly, right? There was always the first day that you'd never taken that person's class before. You don't go and say, can I read your resume? Can I see you teach a class before I take it? You go in and you say, here's my body. I trust you. When I realized that, which was many years ago, I realized the responsibility that it was to teach, that this wasn't a game, that this is serious stuff, that this is someone's body. And because I'm fortunate enough to sit and have sat in many auditions, and I see bodies, instruments that have such potential, and they've been so badly trained or taught. And I get really upset about it because it's not an equal relationship of student and teacher. It's student please and teacher do. And so for a very young age, and I had extraordinary teachers, I'm really lucky. High School Performing Arts, Juilliard, they were just unbelievable teachers. Yeah. I just think it's about trust. I think it's about really doing your homework. Like when I see somebody give a class, like without, I mean, I think there are days to give a class and there are days to teach a class. But if I see somebody come in and just not care, I can become internally desirous of violence. Because a student of dance most often is really obedient. And they will do what you say because they trust that you're asking them for a reason. And so I just, you know, I appreciate that you say that I set it up well, and I'm happy to hear that. But I also take it really, really seriously. It takes me hours to plan a class. And then after I teach it and I realize that it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be, I will go home and rework it and think about it again. And yeah, I'm a little obsessive about it. Not about many things, but definitely about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I like the distinction you said, giving versus teaching.
They're different.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
They're really different.
Yeah.
If I'm warming people up, I'm giving them a warm up. Like I'll say these small things to remember that might have to do with the performance, but that's their time. But when I'm training them with other teachers, I'm teaching them. And then there are the days, which you've experienced, where everybody's too tired and I'll just give it and not push it, right? So it's being that barometer, it's being sensitive enough to that, to the give and take. I think what's hard on Zoom is you can't feel.
Yeah.
Everybody's muted, so there's a wall. Yeah, so that's the hard part about it, is that you don't get the energy, so you can't modulate what you're doing. And on Instagram, you don't see them, so you're just giving yourself this fabulous experience and hoping everybody's coming along for the ride.
Can you talk about dancing smart? Because that seems like an important topic to you, and injury prevention. And has that always been important to your teaching?
I think dance is really, really hard. I think dancing is incredibly hard. But I do think that we can make it easier. I don't think we can make it easy because it's really hard. But I do think you can make things easier. And I think because of the way I was taught and the way I chose to become a teacher, I want to find ways that make things simpler to do. So what really makes standing in passe simpler? What really makes turning to the right simpler? What really makes backspace active simpler? Like, how do we do those things? And I really believe in tools. Like I really believe, as Jordan will tell you, right? I have these things and I actually get embarrassed because I've been saying the same things for a really long time. And I keep thinking, okay, Risa, you've got to change that. But I actually think it works.
Yeah.
And so that to me is the most important thing, is how can we make that more accessible to you? with your body, not a body, but your body. So I do think that there are two schools of thought. There's giving the information, and whoever gets it, and who doesn't, doesn't. Or you learn this way and you learn that way, and I choose to do it that way. Right? Like I know, excuse me?
It's a lot more work to do it that way.
Yeah, that may be true. I don't know, because I haven't done it the other way. But it worked. Teachers ask me, how do I know if I've taught a good class? And I'll say, if they're doing what you want, you've done well. If they're not, go home and figure it out. But if they're not getting it, then no.
Yeah.
Go back and work harder, figure something out.
Bouncing off of one of the last things you said, going student by student, how do you gauge their learning behavior? And I've heard you talk about really pushing a student versus giving them space,
right,
to learn because they learn differently. How do you know?
Well, I don't know that I know. I know that I sense. But I don't know that I know, unless, I'm a Juilliard and I've been training them for 3 years, then I know, right? Because we have those kinds of relationships. But it's pretty, we're pretty transparent as people, and dancers, I think, are pretty transparent. So I think it's pretty clear who's extremely sensitive and who is like pretty tough and can handle being pushed. Like I want to be pushed. I want somebody to yell at me and push me. And but sometimes I'm wrong, and you find that out very quickly, and you alter it if you choose. But I think people are pretty apparent about how they are in classes. You'll find that when you teach, or have found it when you teach. The kid, if you say their name with a tone, they're going to burst into tears, or they're going to go, yeah, I'm going to take that challenge. And then your choice is, do you bend and lean with that, or do you just not? And that's really the choice every teacher has to make.
Yeah. So I know that you're a good mentor.
Oh.
I've heard that from a lot of people. And did you have a good mentor, and how do you become a good mentor?
I had great teachers. It was a different world when I studied. Yeah, well, that's not true. Yes, I had great mentors. Martha Hill was a great mentor, the woman who started the Juilliard Dance Division. My teachers were great mentors in that they taught me how to be a really great student and a really, I hope, fine teacher. I think I love the human condition, and I don't separate them out. Like I don't think we're a body that moves. I think that we are a person who has a body that communicates. And I love that part of it. And I want to know that part of it, because I think the more I know about it, as long as it's not intrusive and private, then the more I can think about how to get them closer to where they say they want to be. And those relationships in that way are very important to me. Yeah. But I don't think you can become a mentor unless somebody wants a mentor.
Yeah.
Right? You can only become a mentor to people because it's a relationship of 2+, right? Yeah. It's not a relationship of 1. And so if that is true, and I do have that, it's because people have wanted that with me and I've wanted it with them. Yeah. It's not something you impose on someone. It's something that is, it's a collaboration, and it's a coming together of that desire.
When you watch dance, what's your favorite thing to see in a live performance? What draws you in?
Oh, It's the same thing that draws me in as a mentor, the heart of someone. I mean, I love watching people with great facility after I can get over my jealousy. But I can be impressed, but it doesn't mean I'm impacted.
Yep.
I can be impressed by that and go, oh man, I wish I could have done that, or I wish I could still do that, or wow, I could never have done that. But that's not what moves me. I'm impressed by it, and yes, jealous. What moves me is like seeing people's bodies communicate something. And it doesn't mean it has to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be a drama. But it is about music, even if there's no sound. And it is about, you know, if there are others on stage, what is that relationship? What is that focus about? What are they feeling and speaking? And I can definitely get impressed and enjoy like form on stage and pieces that are choreographically beautifully framed and structured. But I to be honest, just watching people do steps is really not what interests me. And I know that's a harsh thing to say, but that doesn't move me. It impresses me for a moment.
Yeah.
I know for me, ballet, like on stage at least, is more impressive than moving. Do you think it's possible to make ballet moving?
Oh my God, have you seen Anthony Tudor's works? They are technical and they're wrenching.
Yeah.
Fantastic and funny. Fandango is funny. And yes, I think absolutely.
How do you think the dance world has changed since you started your professional career?
Well, that's a strange question now, because I think the other side of this is going to be something we don't know.
Yep.
But up until now, you know, I've lived long enough to hear often, oh my God, it's never going to be the same. I've heard that, you know, when touring programs were taken away from New York State Council for the Arts, oh no, we'll never travel again. We traveled again. Oh no, there's never going to be money. Well, there was money. Not enough ever in the United States, for sure. So I do think that every dip, for whatever reason, because if it's an economic crisis or a real crisis like 9/11 or now this,
Yeah.
we've definitely been able to, because one of the things that I've learned is people want to dance. So often after crises, they'll go back to a simpler way of doing it. You know, in my day, it was a bus and truck tour versus an airplane tour and things like that. And companies might be smaller and maybe less of them for a while. But then it always seems to kind of come back. I think the way, not that it's changed, but that it's expanded, is that there's more education for people who can't afford it, which is about time.
Yep.
And there's education in places that never had it before. And one of the things that I find in the States that's very different in other places is that there's good training when kids are young. So they are actually really good by the time they're at conservatory age. Versus where other countries that I teach at that conservatory age, a lot of them have just begun, like they've only had a couple of years of training. It's very different training a younger body or training an 18-year-old body. You know, those are different things. Not better, just different. So in some ways it's changed a lot. In some ways it hasn't changed at all. Right? The need to do it, the need to have it, the need for it to exist so people can see it, that hasn't changed.
What have you learned from teaching that you haven't learned from dancing?
Hmm. It's interesting, before you finished the question, what have I learned from teaching? The first thing that came to my mind is how insecure I am.
Mm.
Because I am terrified every time I walk into a studio to teach. Every time I walk to my corner now to teach, I am a nervous wreck.
Just like me before we started this call.
There you go. So I think I am more nervous as a teacher. I get more nervous as a teacher than I do, at least now, as a performer. I get excited before sleep no more, but I don't get nervous in the same way that I do when I'm teaching. So I've learned that after all these years, I'm still a mess as an emotional person. I've learned a lot about how to dance through teaching. Like, I think teaching is the greatest teacher.
Yeah.
And I know when I was still performing a lot, and especially my solo concert, it was like 10 solos a night. Every time I learned a new solo, if there was something about it that I didn't know how to do, I would teach it. Not the solo, but I would teach that element so that I could figure out how to do it. Because if I could teach it and get you to do it, then I could go, oh, I could do that. I actually just figured that out. So I actually really used teaching a lot to learn. I learned that I'm really I have a hyper need of being loved as a teacher, or respected, or actually probably the real answer is that I have to really feel like I did well by them. I think that's the real answer. And if I feel I didn't do well by them, like I taught a Zoom class a couple of weeks ago and I thought it really was horrible. And I didn't sleep for days. Because I also couldn't get feedback because it's Zoom and I'm not in school. And but that pains me and my ego in huge ways, and my fear that I haven't given them the best that I could give them.
In more of the studio world, especially in the comp world, studio owners bring in guest teachers
Right.
to teach, and they call them master classes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a big debate whether or not they should be called master classes because the teachers are young and maybe not master teachers. I would like to get your feedback on that and how you feel about that.
That's interesting. I've never really thought about it. And I do think, I know I know a handful of people who are these teachers. And I think they're fantastic at what they do. And they're surely fantastic dancers. You know them, the ones I'm thinking of. I think that it's one of those phrases or words that encompass and umbrella a few things. So a master class means it's a one-off, right? Risa's coming in to do a master class. It means you're seeing her once or twice. Versus Risa's coming to do a workshop where you're going to see her for 5 days or 10 days or 15 days. I think that's all it means. Like, they're coming for the weekend. Mm-hmm. So it's not a long-term relationship. When I think back to when I was a younger teacher and I was going someplace and teaching a master class, I did feel that I had a definition to live up to. Master is a big word and it carries a lot. And although I've never thought about this, maybe in fact that's one of the reasons I make my insanity so important to me, because that's a big word. Those are big shoes to fit, to say you're a master at anything. So maybe it does that. Maybe that's good. Maybe it takes somebody knowing they're teaching a master class. And if they really think about that, maybe they'll take that seriously. So I think that's actually a really interesting conversation. And I think that would be a really interesting thing to say is you're coming to teach a master class, live up to it.
Yep.
Take that seriously. You're not being publicized as the kid from blah, 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 who's coming in for an hour. You're coming in to teach a master class, get your shit together. So I actually like that, as long as it's being really honored. If it's not honored, then that's not what you're called. Then blah, blah, blah is coming in for the weekend. Right? No,
Right.
Nobody's has to be a master class. Just say, who is coming in and teaching this weekend, and be on time. Is not a master teacher.
That's funny.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never thought about that. I love that conversation. I think that's really valid. I mean, I don't think you get titles for no reason. I actually love titles. So, I mean, I buy into all of that. I like titles, and I think that it means you have to live up to something. If you're a soloist, you have to live up to something. If you're a dancer, you have to live up to something. If you're a wife, husband, partner, you have to live up to something. Those things are, they have content to them.
Okay, we have one last question.
Uh-oh.
It's kind of an advice question. So what's one thing that you know now that you didn't know when you were training? And if anything, what advice can you give to people who are training?
You know, I think when you're training is too broad, because I think when I was 13 in training, it's different than when I was 20 in training, which is different when I was 30 in training, and so forth and so on. I could tell you what increased as I trained was, oh, that doesn't feel right for my body. What does that mean? And how do I navigate that? Oh, that made my body feel better. What was that? How do I own that? So I think my advice would be, trust what you're hearing, / ultimately it's your body. And those two things really have to coexist. I do think that there has to be a certain amount of blind trust, because when you don't know, you need to learn. And that usually means blind trust. So I had my back injury, I had surgery, and I was back, and it always was an issue for me for many years, even post-surgery. So and I knew that the original injury was because when I started training, it was when people believed that that there was no curve in your lower back, right? So in all of dance training, you worked hard to not have that curve. That did not work well for me. So, nor should it have, since we all have a curve in our lower back. But many years later, when I knew my body and I was a professional and had my own identity and my own thinking capacity, there was a ballet teacher in New York whom I really, really liked. But he really did talk about tucking and appreciated that. He was a ballet dancer, and from that time. But I loved his musicality and I loved his combinations. And so I went up to him and I said to him, here, let's make a deal. You leave my pelvis alone and I'll come take class. And he said, fine. And it was great. because I knew that that was not going to be okay for my body.
Yeah.
And you want to do it with other people and they want to do it, that's your business. I was old enough to know how to work around that. And he was in agreement. So we had to find and have a fine relationship. I think getting to that place where you know your body well enough is the goal. Like, how can I really know my body well enough? And it's not to be disobedient or disregard, it's just to know how to make it work for you, right? Because our bodies are all different, right? We're not all the same, especially in modern contemporary world. We're all completely different, right?
Yeah, so this has been great, Risa.
Oh, it's been fun. It's great
Yeah.
to see you. And
Yeah,
nice
great.
to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'll post some videos down below in the description. But again, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor that you take the time.
Seriously.
And we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Great. Good luck in New Hampshire.
Thanks.
Thank you.